The sun was making its grand retreat beyond the cityscape. I looked out from the office window, sighing in contentment at the breathtaking view. It was a spectacle I relished, in those tranquil moments after everyone else had left. My eyes eventually drifted to my desk, cluttered with the remnants of the day's work. Amidst the stacks of files and paperwork, there was one thing that stood out: a photograph worn from frequent handling. It depicted a radiant woman with sparkling eyes, framed by beautiful long curly hair, and a smile that warmed even the coldest of hearts. Her name was Jessica Clark, a colleague, and in my eyes, the epitome of perfection. I reached out, my fingertips tracing the contours of the photo as if trying to soak in her essence. She was like a ray of sunlight in a world clouded by mediocrity. The first time I heard about her was through office gossip on her first day at our New York corporate office. She was originally from some small, out-of-the-way town called Bellingham, Washington, the daughter of a school teacher named Richard and a nurse, Martha. Apparently, they had raised her on a steady diet of love, knowledge, and altruism. From the moment she walked into the office, I could see why everyone was so enchanted by her. Her vivacious personality was apparent in her bright smile and the lively sparkle in her deep blue eyes. I felt drawn to her, compelled by a force I couldn't quite understand. Through snippets of overheard conversations and casual lunchtime chats, I learned more about her. Jessica had always been the curious kind, her thirst for knowledge insatiable. She was an imaginative child, her mind a treasure trove of fascinating stories. The way she spoke about her childhood, it was as if she had filled her quaint little hometown with a magic all its own. Jessica wasn't just intellectually gifted, she was socially adept too. She had a way of making people feel special, seen. She was the kind of person who remembered little details, who asked about your weekend plans and genuinely wanted to know. In our sterile corporate environment, Jessica was a breath of fresh air. As time passed, my fascination with her grew. Every new detail, every new story seemed to add to the allure. I couldn't help but imagine what her life had been like before she moved to the city, how she'd navigated through her school years. What dreams did she chase? What secrets did she harbor? She was an enigma, a puzzle that I was determined to piece together. I loved everything about Jessica: the melodious lilt of her laughter, the way her eyes shone with passion when she spoke about her dreams, and even the gentle rhythm of her breath when she was deep in thought. I wasn't obsessed. I merely admired her, watched her from a distance, reveling in the aura of kindness she exuded. I thought of myself as her guardian, the silent supporter who had her best interests at heart. After all, someone as delicate as her deserved nothing less. I was in the midst of my contemplation when I heard the familiar soft chime of the elevator. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I knew that sound all too well. It was late. Only one person could possibly still be here. Jessica. My heart pounded in my chest. This was the moment I lived for each day, the chance to be with her, to watch over her. It was my duty to protect her, even if she didn't realize it. I put the photograph back in my drawer, straightening my tie before stepping out of my office. The lights in the corridor flickered, casting ominous shadows on the wall, a stark contrast to the serene twilight outside. As I approached the corner, I could hear the soft rustle of papers, followed by a hushed sigh. Turning the corner, I saw her. Her elegant figure was hunched over a desk strewn with documents. She looked tired but determined. Jessica always was the hard worker. I couldn't help but admire her dedication. "Late night, Jessica?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. She jumped, startled by my sudden presence. "Oh, I didn't realize anyone else was still here," she said, her hand pressed to her chest. "Just wrapping up a few things," I said with a smile, stepping into the dimly lit room. "Need a hand with anything?" Her face softened, the lines of exhaustion fading slightly as she smiled back at me. "No, I think I've got it, but thank you." My heart fluttered. It was always like this with her, a simple exchange of words but so meaningful to me. I nodded, retreating back to my office but not before casting one last glance at her. Jessica, engrossed in her work once more, didn't notice my lingering gaze. As I returned to my office, I felt a strange feeling of joy. I was there for her, watching over her, just as I believed a good person should. The image of her working diligently was etched in my mind, a testament to her resilience. I picked up her picture again, my mind painting the world we could share together. As I lost myself in this reverie, the sun finally disappeared behind the city, plunging the office into darkness. The day was over, but our story had only just begun. As time passed, each moment added a new layer to my fascination for Jessica, my Jessica. I became adept at the subtle art of being her unseen guardian. A few minutes late for work, I'd cover for her. Looking stressed during a meeting, I'd take care of her workload without her asking. It was my secret pleasure to silently alleviate her burdens. One day, while passing her desk, I noticed a photograph of a man in a family frame. He was handsome, rugged, with a carefree grin that suggested a level of intimacy with Jessica that ignited a slow burn in my gut. I dismissed the feeling, chalking it up to my protective instinct. The picture held my gaze, but the sound of Jessica's soft footfalls pulled me from my thoughts. I shuffled away, not wanting her to see me lingering. "Oh, hey," she called out, her voice filled with genuine surprise. "I didn't know you were still here." "I could say the same for you," I said, my tone light, masking the turmoil of thoughts in my head. She chuckled, tucking a stray lock of hair behind her ear. "True. We really should start charging rent." Our laughter echoed in the vacant office, a shared moment of camaraderie that warmed my heart. It was fleeting, but it was enough. That night, I found myself unable to forget about the man in the photograph. I tried to dismiss him as an old friend or a distant relative, but something kept nagging at me. It wasn't jealousy, it was concern. I decided to find out who he was for Jessica's sake. After all, I needed to know if he posed any threat to her. Utilizing my skills in cyber forensics, a talent I kept under wraps at work, I scoured the depths of the internet. After a few nights of diligent research, I found him. David Larson, a mechanic, and as my gut had suggested, Jessica's boyfriend. A pang of something undefined pierced my heart. But then, I found something else. Police records of several bar fights and one for domestic disturbance. The feeling transformed into a hard knot of worry. Could he be dangerous? Was Jessica safe? David's childhood, from what I gathered, was a collage of neglect and emotional turbulence. A bitter cocktail that often brews silent observers, those who watch life from the sidelines. I could see it in the way he interacted with others, in the way he carried himself. He was someone who had learned early to rely on himself and trust no one else. He was a man of few words, but his silence spoke volumes. It was as if he was always listening, absorbing, processing. He kept his emotions well guarded, his true thoughts hidden behind a carefully maintained facade. I could see glimpses of his life in the brief moments when his guard would slip, the flicker of sorrow in his eyes, the hint of bitterness in his smile. I could tell he was hiding something, carrying a secret that added to his allure. But there was something else, something unsettling about him. Despite his charming exterior, I couldn't shake off the feeling that David was not what he seemed. I convinced myself that my actions were justified, that I was doing what any good person would do to protect someone they cared about. I was keeping an eye on David. Not out of jealousy, no, but out of concern. The line between my professional life and personal endeavors began to blur as I kept one eye on Jessica and another on David. My once serene evenings watching the sunset turned into tracking David's movements, ensuring that Jessica was safe. Yet even in the midst of this chaos, a strange thrill overtook me. My purpose was no longer just watching over Jessica from a distance. I was her guardian angel, actively shielding her from a potential threat. This was just the beginning. Unbeknownst to Jessica, her safety had become my mission, a duty I embraced with my whole heart. And as I delved deeper into this new role, the calm of the twilight hours faded into an exciting dance of shadows, the start of a much darker chapter. I found myself continuously navigating through a maze of David's life. I was careful to keep my distance, remaining an invisible figure in the background. The more I saw, the more I began to question his character. The late nights at bars, the apparent anger issues, the thinly veiled aggression. Everything suggested that David was far from the ideal partner for Jessica. One evening, I decided to follow him home from one of his regular bar nights. A dangerous curiosity propelled me forward, a burning need to know more about the man who held Jessica's affections. His home was a disorderly mess, a stark contrast to the orderly persona he portrayed on his social media profiles. I watched from a distance as he stumbled out of a cab, carelessly tossing money at the driver before staggering towards his front door. I followed, maintaining a careful distance, my heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and fear. Peering through the slightly ajar window, I watched as he clumsily navigated his way through the house, knocking over furniture and shouting profanities into the quiet night. It was a disturbing spectacle, one that made my skin crawl with dread. I was ready to retreat when I saw something that froze me in my tracks. There, prominently displayed on his living room wall, was a picture of Jessica. It wasn't a normal photograph. It was one I had never seen before, a candid shot of her laughing, unaware of the camera. A sense of violation washed over me. My admiration for Jessica was respectful, an appreciation from a distance. But this was an intrusion, a breach of her privacy. The thought of him taking such liberties with Jessica's life sparked a flame of anger within me. The next day at work, I watched Jessica closely, looking for any sign of distress. She seemed her usual radiant self, her cheerfulness a stark contrast to the dark secrets I was uncovering about her boyfriend. I felt a sudden urge to warn her, but the potential repercussions held me back. I was, after all, meddling in her private life. But was it meddling if I was trying to protect her? A new resolve settled within me. I wouldn't confront her, not yet. I would gather undeniable evidence, something that would clearly show her the danger she was in. As I delved further into my secret investigations, I couldn't help but feel a sense of righteousness. I wasn't merely a colleague anymore. I was a silent vigilante, a protector keeping watch over an unsuspecting victim. In my heart, I knew that my intentions were noble. I was treading a fine line, but for Jessica, I was willing to cross it. The sun set on another day, and with it, I plunged deeper into the murky waters of my secret mission, the once serene twilight replaced with the thrill of a high-stakes game. Over time, my uneventful existence morphed into a high-stakes game of shadows and secrets. Each day unveiled a new facet of David's life, cementing my belief that Jessica was in grave danger. One evening, tailing David to a low-lit bar, I noticed something that sent a chill down my spine. As he left the bar, a woman followed him. She was not Jessica. They climbed into his car, their shadows mingling in a way that suggested intimacy. I followed them to a rundown motel on the city's edge. I watched from a safe distance, the biting cold gnawing at my bones while anger seared my insides. David was not just a threat, he was a cheater. Jessica deserved far better. When dawn broke, David emerged alone from the motel. I lingered in the shadows, allowing him to drive off before documenting the incriminating scene. A photograph of the motel, tangible evidence of David's infidelity. It was time for the ugly truth to reveal itself. At work the following day, I invited Jessica for a coffee after work, citing something important I needed to discuss. She agreed, her face reflecting a curiosity that set my heart racing. In the quiet ambience of the coffee shop, with the envelope of photos between us, an eerie calm settled over me. I was the harbinger of truth, I convinced myself. "Jessica, there's something you should see," I began, nudging the envelope towards her. As she flipped through the photographs, her face turned pale. "What? Why do you have these?" she stuttered, her voice barely audible. "I thought you deserved to know, Jessica," I said, my voice steady, devoid of emotion. She looked at me, her eyes widening in shock and a horrifying understanding. "You've been stalking me," she whispered in a shocked tone. "Not stalking, Jessica," I retorted, a disappointed smile tugging at the corners of my lips. Protecting. Her reaction was frustrating to say the least. Why didn't she understand? The fear, the disbelief. It was a sight to behold. After some calming, we ended the conversation amicably. I promised to no longer follow her or update her about David's habits. That night, the local news reported a tragic accident. Jessica, in a state of shock and disarray, had lost control of her car and crashed into a lamppost. Her beautiful life extinguished in an instant. Alone in my apartment, I let the gravity of what transpired wash over me. My intentions to protect Jessica had led to an unexpected end. Yet, as twisted as it was, I couldn't deny the satisfaction that coursed through me. I was happy. As I gripped the tool I used to cut her car brakes in my hand, my mind felt at ease. This way. I knew Jessica wouldn't have to worry about what David was doing behind her back, ever again.